Hello and welcome to The Content Bite, a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, a freelance journalist, copywriter, and content producer. I'm also the founder of Rachel's List, a jobs board and community for Aussie writers and other creatives.
Hello, and I'm Lynn Testoni. I'm a journalist and a content writer as well, and Rachel and I are your weekly co-hosts, and every week we're bringing you all kinds of tips, ideas, and some fabulous guests to help you make the most of your freelance business.
Hi Lynn, how are you going?
I'm good, Rach. How are you? I'm pretty good. I've been really busy these last couple of weeks and locked down as well, but there's lots of exciting projects.
Yes, I'm having fun balancing remote learning and deadlines.
Yay.
Okay, I'm being a little bit facetious about the fun factor there, but something I'm sure that will be fun is our episode today, because regular listeners will know that we are doing a series on successful freelancers. And this week we have the fabulous Melanie Padgett Powers from the Deliberate Freelancer podcast, which is one of my favorites. I know that you were on it and you love it as well, don't you, Lynn?
Yes, I do. It is one of my favorites. I've learned so much from Mel's podcast, and she's got great guests, and it's a really good one, and we can highly recommend it. So yes, and I was a guest on it last year, which is great. She said she got a few Australian listeners from that, so that's good. And she always has such great and practical information. Sometimes she has guests, sometimes with herself. And it's always really useful.
Okay, well, we've got a lot to cover with Melanie today. So with no further ado, let's do a quick bio and get her in the hot seat. Melanie Padgett Powers is the owner of Mel Edits. She's a freelance writer, managing editor, copy editor, and proofreader in the Washington, D.C. area, who primarily works with membership associations and healthcare organisations. She has a journalism degree and started out as a newspaper reporter. Melanie is also the creator and host of the Deliberate Freelancer podcast, which we mentioned above, which focuses on the business side of freelancing, and it just surpassed 100 episodes. Oh, congratulations, Mel. Learn more at www.meledits.com, and you can connect with her on Twitter at meledits, but we will mention more about how to find her at the end. Melanie, welcome to the Content Bite.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for all your kind words at the beginning.
No worries.
No, we do love your podcast, definitely.
I appreciate it. And I should say too, I'm a fan of your podcast. I definitely listen to it all the time.
Oh, that's good. We never know. You never know where your listeners are coming from, do you?
I know. No, I'm not just kissing your butt. I definitely listen to it.
Love it.
It's great to have you on the Content Bite. And we've got so much to talk to you about, but maybe start with your writing career and how it started. I realized you started as a journalist and then you worked in-house for industry associations before you started freelancing. So tell us a bit about that. And is it true you hated your job and just made the leap one day?
That is true. I started as a newspaper reporter. I have a journalism degree, and I worked at newspapers in mostly small towns, a couple of dailies in my 20s. And then I moved to the Washington, D.C. area. It's 21 years ago, which sounds insane to me. And when I got here, I wasn't sure how I was going to use my journalism degree. I knew I still wanted to write and edit, and I fell into a job at a membership association about public health and realized I really liked working with members, interviewing members, and working for members. And so I just had a career with membership associations for the last 20 years. And then about 7.5 years ago, I was at an association that had a fairly new CEO, and my boss had left, and the boss I had,
The new boss
was awful. I'm pretty vocal about that. And I just was like, I don't want to find another job. You never know if you're going to really like a job until you get in there. And I didn't want to make new friends again. And I was just sort of over it, bouncing from job to job. So I just thought, well, I'll freelance. I didn't even know what that meant. It was kind of arrogant. I was like, oh, I could freelance, having no idea really what that meant. And so I did. It was October 2013, put in my 2-week notice as we do here. And I quit and started, trying to look for clients. So
you're happy. It's been a good decision. Yeah.
I absolutely love it. I was very lucky that I'd been in DC for so long. I have quite a network here. We have a ton of membership associations, and that's my main client base. Mm-hmm. And so that's worked out really well. And I tell people all the time, especially in the beginning, when they would say, how's it going? As if it was awful. And I'd say, it's great. I never want to be an employee ever again.
Oh, that's nice.
That's really a familiar story to so many of us.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know that we've talked a little bit about your podcast. One of the series that you did recently was the Six Figure series. I think that was the one that Lynn was on. And I was just wondering what inspired you to do that series, and did you find it hard getting freelancers to talk about their income, or did they want to?
People will admit that they make six figures. That part wasn't hard. We didn't get into the nitty-gritty of finances so much on that one. Yeah, Lynn was on episode 81 and back in the fall. And I did that back in the fall of 2020. I did, I think, 4 episodes. And then it was so popular. I got such great response and great downloads from it that I did a couple more earlier this year. And I plan to do them sporadically throughout the year, like maybe 2 or 4 episodes in a row of Six Figure Freelancers. And it really came about because people always talk about that, right? As a goal, I want to make 6 figures. And I thought, well, what does that actually mean? And are there commonalities that successful freelancers share? And yes, there are. And I wanted to also show, though, that there was a lot of different ways to get there. I had a variety of freelancers on. There was digital marketing people and brand strategists and copywriters and a tech writer. And I wanted to show all the different ways that you could actually get there, but also with the message that you don't have to be a 6-figure freelancer. Like, set the income goal that's right for you. I'm a 6-figure freelancer because I live in Washington, D.C. and it's very expensive and I want to keep my house. And so it's required, to live here comfortably. But if I lived in my home state of Indiana, I could probably make half that money and that would be perfectly fine. So, whatever goal is right for you. Like I said, we didn't talk so much about financials in that one, but I do believe in being very transparent about finances. And I have talked about it with various people on the show. And I do break down sometimes of, what I charge if I'm trying to create a project rate, what I start out with as my hourly rate and kind of how I calculate that. And, if I don't go below a certain amount, still protecting client confidentiality. I don't say this is how much I proposed, but I like to be open about that kind of thing. I think it's hard, especially for newer freelancers, to find out how much people are charging and how to charge things. And I think sharing that information helps all of us.
Yeah. In listening to that series, like you said, you talk to so many different people, throughout that series. And I found myself, picking up things from people who don't really do what I do, but it was just fascinating, seeing how they did things differently, I suppose. Did you have those kinds of light bulb moments yourself and get some strategies yourself that you've taken on in your own business?
Yeah, the beautiful thing about a podcast is I get to interview successful people and steal all their ideas, right? It's a very selfish thing.
Yeah, well, I think we get that.
Yeah. So a couple things jumped out. I mean, yes, there's things I'm either relating to or new ideas, or I have these aha moments. One of my 6-figure freelancers, Amy Posner, was talking about how she hired several different types of people. So not just a virtual assistant, she had a tech person. She also is a very successful copywriter, and she hires her own copywriter to market her business, which I thought was really interesting because a lot of freelancers say it's hard to talk about what I do and hard to promote myself. So hire somebody. And it seems really simple, but when she said that, I thought, oh, I could actually hire more than one person. I don't have to have just one VA that does all the things. I could hire maybe 3 VAs who have expertise in different areas. And so that kind of stuck with me. And then another guest I had, Laura Pennington Briggs, talked about how she's very successful. And she talked about how she tried to be an agency for about a year and she absolutely hated it. And I thought that was so reassuring because we talk all the time, you get to the certain level, oh, you have to scale up. And everyone thinks that means becoming an agency. And I don't want to be an agency either. I don't want employees, definitely not. And I don't want a big team of subcontractors. I do subcontract, but I don't want a team that I have to manage all the time. So it was very reassuring to hear there are different ways that you can scale. You don't have to become an agency.
I agree. I think each one of your guests said, showed a different way of earning money, and it was really interesting. I think they all did share that real business mindset, though. I think that's something everybody did when they think about like creating a business. It wasn't just about being a creative. I think sometimes when you are a creative freelancer, sometimes you get into the trap that it's money or being financially successful is a bit of a dirty thing instead of being quite something to celebrate or aim for?
Yeah. And I talk all the time about how you should think and act and be a business owner. And it was interesting to hear that every single one of those six-figure freelancers said that without, like, we've all come to that conclusion. And that's how everyone has been successful, is that they think of themselves like a business and they do everything with that mindset. And that is really what has led them to success, for however they define success.
I know that everyone podcasts for different reasons, but what's your reason? I mean, has the podcast brought you business, or is it more of a marketing activity for you to sort of stay visible in your industry?
I don't make money on the podcast, which hopefully will change one day. I did not start it to make money, and it's not my client base. So it isn't a marketing strategy for me, which if I was smart, I would have done a podcast for membership associations. But I really love talking to freelancers and helping them try to figure out how to be a business and how to be more successful. And I was having these organic conversations with freelancer friends, and I go to pre-pandemic, I went to a lot of writer and editor conferences, and I would just have these conversations in the hallway, and I was just giving free advice constantly. And it was really motivating, and it made me feel good to have people come back later and say, you know what, you gave me the confidence to do this thing, or I tried your tactic and it really worked. And I thought, well, how can I give this advice in a more sustainable way, more regularly? And I was a huge fan of podcasts. And so around 2017, I started thinking, oh, I should just do a podcast. And I thought about it honestly for like a year and a half before I finally launched it, because I was intimidated by all the tech and the time that it would take. But, we're content people. So the content I had in my head, like that, I knew I had my format down. I knew what kind of content I wanted to focus on. I had my name. And once I finally got some help with the tech, I launched it. And I have gotten business in a roundabout way just because I've grown my network, and I've, other freelancers, as we recommend each other to clients that are the right fit for us. That's been huge. And then I've actually teamed up with a couple of the freelancers I've had on my show for various projects. And some of those people too, especially the ones locally, have really become friends of mine now. And so in that way, it has grown my business.
Oh, that is interesting. I mean, that's probably similar to the experience that Rachel and I have, that it's about visibility, and certainly being part of a network of freelancers and a network of freelance writers is a really lovely thing. It's positive. We all learn from each other. And I do think we share leads and give each other business, definitely.
And that's really been the theme of so many guests that we've talked to this month. It keeps coming up, doesn't it, Lynn?
It does.
How rewarding it is for freelancers to help other freelancers. And I find it so refreshing, because I think at the beginning of your freelance career, you can be so terrified of, kind of other freelancers supposedly stealing your work, and you think there isn't enough to go around. So I have to keep my cards close to my chest. And the more that you embrace other freelancers, actually, the better it gets for you. I really believe that.
Yeah,
I agree wholeheartedly. I tell beginner freelancers all the time, we are not competitors. There's enough work out there for everybody. Everybody has their own little focus and a style. And I get way more work from other freelance writers, and I just have this lovely community that I can ask a million questions of when I get stuck on something.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's how I found a lot of the best things. People have shown me good digital tools. I found my accountant that way, different clever ways, different clients, different ways to manage businesses, all sorts of things. And that's really helpful. And they've all been suggested by other freelancers. And I was going to ask you a bit about your time tracking project, because that's been a bit of a thing for you. You love tracking time, don't you? And it's really interesting. Tell us a bit about it and how you found it.
Well, I got into time tracking. should give a shout out to Laura Vanderkam, who's a writer here in the US. And I know her through some other people. And I saw her give a keynote a couple of years ago at our writers conference about time tracking. And then I bought one of her books, and I bought all of her books. And I got into time tracking off and on the last few years, but really this past year I started it, and in 2021 I do it religiously every day. And I use the Toggle app because I was doing on pen and paper before, which was fine to sort of for the day, but it didn't allow me to run reports and analyze that time tracking. And so time tracking has done great things for me. There's a lot of benefits. One thing is it keeps me off social media during the day, or I'm not on social media for longer periods. And it's hilarious because no one else is going to see this time tracking, but just knowing that I'm going to have to tell my time tracker that I was on Facebook for 35 minutes, and it's always longer than you think, right? Like I was on there for 5 minutes, and then you look at the Toggle app and it says that you were on there for 35 minutes. And I'm thinking, what was I doing for 35 minutes on Facebook?
Yeah.
And so it kind of keeps me more on track, but it also gives me a lot of information. Like I know how much time certain types of projects takes, and that's really helpful for the next project that's similar, to know how to price that. I price in project rates, and so I'm not undercharging myself. I'm not trying to guess how much time something would take. So that's been really helpful. And another thing is it just tells me where my time goes. I know when I'm most productive, or when I might be thinking I did a lot of work that day, but when it comes down to it, I worked for 2 hours. Or I might realize that I work, for me, I work a lot more hours at the beginning of the week. I'm very productive usually on Mondays and Tuesdays. I have started to realize I don't do a lot on Friday afternoons. So why am I still sitting at my desk on Friday afternoons? So there's always sort of a work in progress with my schedule and figuring out what works for me and really leaning into those times of day.
Mm-hmm.
That is interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
I like Toggle as well. I don't use it as much as I should, but it's such a great little app, isn't it? And it can keep you honest.
Yes. And
Yeah.
it's fun to run. I'm now doing, at the end of each quarter, I'm doing a podcast episode where I analyze my time tracking for everyone for that quarter. And so Toggle lets me run reports and really do that type of analysis, which I completely nerd out on.
Wow, fascinating. I'll look forward to that for sure. Well, your podcast is called The Deliberate Freelancer. And every time I listen to your intro, I get the sense that that was, that name was really no accident, that you're deliberate in everything you do in regards to building your business. Is that right? Like, do you have these very strategic goals in regards to the clients you pick up and your earnings and that sort of thing?
I am very deliberate. That's my personality. I like to say I like order in my life. That's not to say I'm super rigid, but it's just my personality and my mindset. So like I was giving all these examples of how I look at Toggle and structure my week based on the analysis of that. So it's more sort of how I work and what I work on and when I work and how I market. I don't set huge goals. I do have a monthly income goal now that I put on paper and I track every month, which I started a few years ago. My friend Maggie, who is a friend in real life, but she came on my podcast and she's very diligent about tracking that way. And I thought, yeah, I can't just keep all those numbers in my head. What is actually coming in every month, and what do I have set up for the next month? And so I do have that monthly income goal, and I have kind of a yearly goal, but I'm not really hard on myself if I don't hit it. I don't, work overtime to make sure I hit that goal. And I like leaving things open to opportunities. Someone asked me the other day, where do you want your business to be in 5 years? And I thought, I have no idea. I never set those 5-year goals. When an employer asks you that, I never really have good answers, because I really just want to follow the opportunities and follow what interests me and keep moving forward, but I don't want to have to set rigid goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think one of the things is the way things are changing, and who would have predicted a pandemic? In 5 years, everything could be quite different, and it's sort of nice to have some flexibility. Otherwise, you can get undone by all that if you're too rigid in your systems, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that really happened at the beginning of the pandemic. We all saw that, where, we were all scared. We were all anxious. I think most of us lost some income, or something in our business had changed. And those who were like, all right, I got to figure out what to do now, and we're more flexible, I think figured it out a little sooner and were able to get new clients, or replace their income, or deal with the situation a little better than those who were like, but I had this plan and this is what I was going to do this year. So you do have to be flexible, especially in business.
Yeah, I think so too. I know one of the things about the way you run your business is you're quite big on anchor clients. And I know from listening to your podcast that you did lose one of those in the pandemic, but you've recovered beautifully. So what are your tips for keeping those sort of ongoing client relationships, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, I have 4 anchor clients, I would say now. I realized that that's been a lot more up and down during the pandemic. I got a few new ones at the beginning of the pandemic last summer, but there were 2 that I worked for that I'm no longer working for. One was COVID related, and of course that work slowed down. And another was just a temporary contract. So I think that one thing that is changing, I had this main anchor client that I was relying on, maybe to a default. I knew that was a risk, but I really loved them and they were local and it was good money, but it was about half of my income. And when the pandemic hit, they stopped. I lost all of that because they're a membership group here and they have a lot of events and they had to close their place down. So that I had to figure out quickly, how am I going to replace half my income? And yeah, I panicked a little bit, but I did know the previous 5 years that was a risk. And I always thought, well, maybe someday they'll get rid of the newsletter and I'll have to figure that out. But I would have a warning, not I was there on a Thursday and by Saturday we were done. Right. So what I did that has been really helpful is I got this idea actually pre-pandemic in January 2019. The new year, I sent out an email to my entire network and said, here are the services I offer and here are the things I'm specifically looking for this year. And I think at the time it was a newsletter to manage, a magazine to proofread, and a couple of other things. And I got a huge response to that because I was very specific about what I could do for people. So when the pandemic hit, I decided to do that again. And I was kind of lighthearted about it. I said, oh, I have some unexpected availability. Thanks, pandemic. And, because everyone knew. And I said, this is what I can do. This is how I can help. And I tried to be creative about, because luckily I'm a healthcare writer. So I thought, well, what could I do that's COVID related that people might be looking for? And so I put a few fresh ideas, but you don't have to be a healthcare writer at the time. You could have been like, all right, I'm a tech writer. I can do these new things, or what can I do that is online only as opposed to in person? And so I sent that email out, and that's how I got a lot of work from it. I got 2 referrals to those 2 big anchor clients that I gained last summer. And incidentally, those referrals were both from freelancers.
Oh, nice.
So again, you get work from freelancers. One was a freelancer who said, hey, I saw this job ad. You should apply for this temporary position. And then another one was, I'm a writer for this organization and they really need editors and I will directly put in a good word for you. And it was a big organization and I got to sort of skip all the steps and get hired right away because my writer friend said, you should hire her. And I will say that email that I did in January 2019 and the email I did in May 2020, I just coincidentally from each of those got $30,000 in new projects or new clients.
Oh, wow.
And some of those clients I still have.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's just a reminder to keep a list of your entire network. That's potential clients that you've talked to, at least not cold emails, potential clients, or, have had conversations with current clients, old clients, all your freelancer friends, your former coworkers who work in some communications department somewhere. And, and email them periodically, whether it's one-on-one or kind of like I did a mass email at the time, and really be specific about how you can help them and what services you can provide, not just, hey, I'm a healthcare writer. Do you need help? They don't necessarily know what that is. You have to put the idea into their head of what they need help with. I can help you. Are you overwhelmed by all the editing you're doing right now? I can take that off your plate. That's what I try to keep in mind all the time.
Yeah, that's a really ballsy approach. And obviously it paid off for you.
Yeah.
And you offered those solutions, which is what we're always told to do. Don't make it about yourself, make it about what you can do for them. And it's so much more appealing to the client side, I suppose.
Yeah. And it's funny. I didn't think of it as ballsy at the time. I thought of it as like, I need some money. But yeah, I'm pretty open with my clients and a lot of them I consider my friends. I like to build those kind of relationships and it's a two-way street. Like I'm not begging for work here, but I'd like to help you and I can offer these and I have talent in this area. And so, when the time is right, think of me.
Yeah, yeah. I know you've talked before about how you favor value-based pricing over hourly pricing. Can you talk us through how you moved in that direction and maybe share some of your pricing and quoting tips, the ones that work for you?
Sure. So I don't know when, but at some point toward early on in my freelance career, I realized that I was getting penalized with my hourly rate because, as you both know, that, if you have a lot of experience and you're good and you're fast, it doesn't matter what your hourly rate is. If you work fast, you're going to get paid less money than if you're slow and take your time and drag things out. And so I thought, I heard a lot of other freelancers. This is again where the community comes in talking about project rates. And I thought, okay, so how do I do that? And I like to name things fun things because that just makes it more fun and keeps it in my mind. And so I have an hourly rate that I call my secret hourly rate, but that's basically just, your internal rate. And that's where I start from. Right now, mine is $125 an hour, US dollars. And I just take that as it's not really a secret because I tell all of you, but I I take that and I use my time tracking and I try to figure out how many hours I would need for a project. And I do the math and then I bump it up, and I don't have a set percentage. I take a lot of things into consideration when I bump that up. I really think about what's my lowest I would do first. Like, say I bump it to 2000 and then I think, well, I would not do the project for less than 2000. All right, maybe I go for 2800, and then that leaves room for negotiation. But I always know what my sort of, I won't go below
rate.
2000. Yeah, walk away rate. That's a good one, because you might get flustered when you're having those conversations and then suddenly you've agreed to 1700 and you thought, well, how did that happen? How did I agree to that?
Yeah.
And so it's really good to have that in your head. And when I'm setting those rates, I also think about a lot of different things, like the value that the client gets out of it. I mean, if you're writing a white paper and that's a marketing thing for them and they're going to make 10, 20, $30,000, don't charge them $500 for a white paper, because they're going to make a lot of money off that, and they shouldn't be lowballing you, or you shouldn't be offering a low price. They're not paying for my time, right? They're not paying for the hours I work. They're paying for the fact that I have a journalism degree. I have over 20 years of experience. I've been doing this forever. If it's a membership association, I'm very well experienced in that area. I'm a very experienced healthcare writer or public health writer. They're paying for all that. They could go out and find any writer, but they're going to pay for my expertise and my experience.
And that's
so it's
why
important.
you're faster and more efficient.
Exactly.
You know
exactly.
these things, good references,
right.
You've got experience, the right terminology.
And I was a daily reporter. And even though that was ages ago, that trained me to work really fast and on deadline. And that's an asset when you can do that. I don't always have those tight deadlines, but when it comes up, I can definitely work fast.
When you come up with your figure, are you applying a percentage according to projects that you've done in the past that, you are comfortable with the rate? Or do you think about, like you said, with the white paper, how much they might potentially make? And then do you think of a percentage that you want to make of that? How does it work?
Yeah, it's fuzzy math. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
like it's, like I said, I might get to this rate where I think, well, I think that'll cost, if I did the hourly rate, and because I'm always aiming to earn more than that $125 an hour, because there are projects I will take for a variety of reasons that might be a little under that, because it's a new client I want to get in with, or I believe passionately in that topic. And so, yeah, it's not usually a percentage. It really is just like playing around with the math. Like, okay, I'm at 2000, don't really want to make just 2000. I've got all this other work that is coming in, okay, so let's try 2800. Are they, do I know they have a big budget? Do I know they really want this quickly, or are they a nonprofit that they can't really afford this much? So I just play around with the numbers, and I'm on the calculator for a little while figuring that out. And I almost always send it in a proposal or a short email. I don't quote it on the phone because I get flustered. So I get that number, and, and I like to have a number that makes me a little uncomfortable. I don't want to be like, 2000, that's fine. I try to have a number that pushes me a little bit. And, more often than not, they're like, that's fine. And I'm like, wow, really? Okay, that's great. And if they don't say that, I will negotiate, down a little bit. You can also, if they come to a rate that you think is too low, that's where you can negotiate on scope of work. So you don't always have to negotiate on price. You can negotiate on cutting some things out of scope of work or having a longer deadline or other things that might help you.
I love it when they say yes, and like you've quoted something and you think this is outrageous, and then they come back and say yes straight away. But what concerns me is when they come back and say they want it all itemized, and you have to go in and do that instead of giving a project fee, which is
I've never had anyone ask that. And I have had people say, what's your hourly rate? And I do have an hourly rate for copy editing. And it kind of varies too between clients. I've bumped it up a bit. It's just easier that way for me. I don't do a ton of copy editing, but yeah, I've never had anyone ask for it itemized. And I think if I did, I would come up with something that basically would not, I don't work that way. Like, this is a project rate. This is what you get for this, and try to explain all the things that they would be getting for that.
That's a great way to say this is the way I work, sort of thing, because I always think if they want it itemized, it's because they want to cherry pick things out of
exactly
the list.
It was probably one of my guests that said this once that really struck with me. If a client or potential client is focused so much on the price and not the discussion about the work and all that you can do, like, that's a huge red flag. Those clients are always problems, because they are maybe going to cherry pick, or they want to pay you hourly and keep track of all of your hours, or want to know, all the details of how you work. And that's not what they're paying for. They're not paying for knowing when my butt is in the chair and how many hours I worked on their project. And did I work on their project for 3 hours in a row, or did I work on it on a Saturday? I mean, none of that matters to the project itself.
Yeah.
So what does a typical week look like for you? Is there such a thing?
No, there's definitely not a typical week. That's good and bad at times. I have a diversity of services and clients, and I like not having a typical week. That's a lot of the fun, but it also means I have less structure, and I struggle with that. I've actually been thinking and talking with freelancer friends recently about that. Like, gosh, it'd be so much easier if I just had these, I worked not 9 to 5, but 9 to like 2 every day. And it was exactly this setup. But, I have to be really self-motivated to keep on track with everything. And deadlines are one thing. I hit all my deadlines, but it's all that time leading up to deadline, right? Of all the things you have to do. You're like, oh, that deadline's in 3 weeks. I have plenty of time. And so I'm really trying to create a better structure. So at least I have sort of more office hours for me during the day and during the week. And I know, for example, I'm really leaning toward not working Friday afternoons and maybe working Friday morning only on my podcast. And so I'm really trying to think of things that would fit into sort of my personality and my, I think I mentioned earlier, peak productivity time.
So that goes back to your time tracking as well, doesn't it? Saying when you're working best and when you seem to achieve more.
Yeah, time tracking definitely helps structure that. And that is what all that time tracking I'm doing is what has led me to realize certain days are not working as well as others. And so I'm trying to figure all that out right now.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, we talked a little bit earlier about COVID and how that impacted you personally in your business. Do you feel that freelancers in the US are starting to get back into more of an even keel? Is there that sort of vibe there now, or are people still scrambling a little bit?
I think a lot of people, I know a lot of freelancers. You all know Jennifer Goforth Gregory. She's a friend of mine in real life. We know each other through our writers organization here. And she did a poll through her Facebook group that showed freelancers, most of them I'm assuming were American, but last year actually made more money than the year before. And I think a lot of that was because we were so scared in the beginning and everybody did so much marketing and then was afraid to turn down work last year.
Yeah.
I think that is the part that people struggled with. Like, they were overworking, and many of those were moms, and so they were also homeschooling, as they're dealing with what you are dealing with, Rachel.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that part that is starting to feel a little more normal. Hopefully here, all of our kids are going back to school in the fall, and, they're in camps now and in a lot of places. And the work definitely has started to come back. My anchor client came back in April on a smaller scale, but I'm back with them. I've actually had 2 in-person meetings with them. I think the areas that struggling, I can't really speak directly for them, but I still wonder about people who were travel writers and food and wine and dining writers, but I think they had to figure out a new niche or something different last year anyway. So they're probably leaning into whatever they figured out last summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, the US is pretty open right now. People are walking around like there's not a pandemic going on. There's still a pandemic. We are fortunate here to have access to vaccines. I've been fully vaccinated since May. COVID rates where I live are very, very low. There's a very high vaccination rate, over 70%, and still going. But that's not true of the entire country. There are rates that are extremely low in some places. My home county in Indiana is only at 20% vaccination rate, even though they have full access to the vaccines. Unfortunately, it's just become very political here. And I know the world knows what has happened in the US the last few years with, he who shall not be named. And that has just made it, unfortunately, very political here. So, things are really open right now, but, there's the Delta variant and none of us know what's going to happen. So, we could, as freelancers, have to deal with another lockdown at some point, or people still really struggling, businesses still struggling, economically. Nothing is certain. I don't think anything was certain pre-pandemic, but we thought it was certain, right? We were more naive about it.
Yeah.
And now we realize we always have to be marketing and planning ahead and having a backup plan. And, if you can, put some money in savings and really be prepared for, that kind of uncertainty, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of our listeners are journalists, transitioning into freelancing and maybe a little bit of content writing after working in house. What sort of advice would you have? Because I know you started as a journalist too.
Yeah, I think one, here in the States, and I'm sure it's like this, in most places, it's really hard now to be a freelance journalist and make a good living, or to even pay the bills. I know people that are doing it, but it depends on what part of this country they live in. And so I know a lot of people who are still doing journalism as a freelancer who are also doing content marketing. And I would encourage journalists who are going freelance to not, be snobby about content marketing. I think a lot of times we think, and I can say this because I was a journalist who felt this way, that oh, I'm a journalist. Like, I'm not going to show my sources of story. Are you kidding? I'm not going to, do whatever, all these things we do in content marketing, but your journalism is an asset. Like, I use my journalism every single day. I get to write narrative magazine features and interview fascinating doctors and medical professionals and PhDs about science, and use my journalism to do that, but just for membership associations. And I would say play up your journalism in everything you do, because there are plenty of writers out there, but the fact that you're a journalist shows that you have the training, the experience. We had mentioned earlier, you can write really fast. The ethics of journalism. Unfortunately, there are some writers that don't truly know what plagiarism is. They can copy and paste things from a website and think that's fine. That is not fine. And so you have interviewing skills, you have research skills, how to find sources. Depending on your area, you might know how to find, research articles in PubMed. So play up all those journalism skills, because people really want to hire trained journalists that they know they can trust to do the work, and they don't have to sort of explain those basics to them.
I love that. That's so empowering. Will be for all our listeners.
I am very pro journalism. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were mentioning that, you at conferences and things like that, you're often giving advice in the hallways and talking to people and that sort of thing. So you've obviously seen a lot of mistakes that freelancers make over and over. What are some of the ones that you just think, oh, you shouldn't be doing that?
this isn't a mistake so much, but that idea of not thinking like a business. I always say when I hear a freelance, you can almost hear it in their tone that they're quote unquote just a freelancer. Like they just don't think, and they think, oh, it's hard to get work out there and I don't know if people will hire me. Like you have to have a whole mindset shift of thinking you're looking for work, you're hiring clients too. It's not just you trying to find jobs. I think working an hourly rate is a mistake that a lot of us make. There are times, like I said, I still do some of that, but really trying to get away from that hourly rate. I think that's a mistake. I think not having a website or not updating your portfolio. I know some writers that say, I don't really need a website. Yeah, you do, because think about anything that you buy or want in life. What do? You go online first. And even a doctor, if I go and I look for a doctor and they don't have a website, I think, well, I don't know anything about them. I'm not going to call them first. So I think you have to have a website. You have to keep that portfolio update. I hire writers as well as a managing editor. And sometimes I go to these portfolios and their articles are several years old. So I immediately think, well, what have they been doing for the last few years? So that matters. And I think just not developing some sort of marketing strategy and building your network. You always have to be marketing. I know people hate that term and they think they have to have this marketing strategy using marketing terms. I just call it relationship building. Constantly be talking to people about your business and it's not, to me, it's not promoting myself all the time. Like I love writing, I love editing, I love associations, I love journalism. I can talk about those things with you naturally. And then you'll hear when I'm talking that, oh, she mentioned she's a managing editor. I'm not saying, hire me, hire me, hire me. So I think
this is subliminal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think those are the mistakes of like just being sort of more shy about talking about your business and what you can offer people, not updating that portfolio, not thinking like a business. Like it's really about trying to gain that confidence that you are a business owner. And I can see the difference when I meet people, whether they've started to believe that in themselves or they're still really lacking that confidence.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I totally agree. That's interesting. Very interesting.
I think it really is what you were saying. It really is that mindset shift. And sometimes that happens, after you've been sort of messed around by a client and you become a lot more confident or something's happened. It's just a shift, isn't it? At some point it happens and you start to just say, well, no, I deserve better than this, and say no to people and, go after those better clients and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You really have to believe in yourself. And it's hard to, how do I make that happen for you? Like that's a really, the $1 million question.
Yeah.
I think if you're really struggling with that, maybe you need therapy, maybe you need a business coach, maybe, start listening to all of our podcasts nonstop to help, we'll try to help you build that confidence, like really try to work on that part of it. And that will help improve your business and grow your business as well.
I think one of the really good tips that I heard about that is to go back and look at all the old testimonials that you've been given from clients. And that can sort of boost you up and think, hey, these people thought I was good at this, and can give you a bit of a boost.
Yeah.
There's a point when you stop looking at job ads.
Yeah.
And you think actually freelancing is my job now and that is my business. There's a point, instead of doing it as you said, Mel, when you started, and this is the same when I started, when you just started freelancing because you just thought, I'll do this until something better comes along, and then you realize that I don't want
this is the better thing.
This is it.
Yeah. I think that's such a great point. Yeah, because if you're still looking at job ads, your foot is in one door and your other foot's in the other door, right? Like you're not, and you're sort of like, I don't know if this is going to work out. But yeah, that's a really great point. When you stop looking at those job ads, you're in it.
Yeah.
You've always got something new on the boil. So is there anything that you'd like to tell us about? Next things? I mean, obviously we'll push everyone to your podcast because there's always something new there.
Yeah. So if you go to deliberateFreelancer.com, you can sign up for my newsletter, which I launched in the spring. My podcast comes out on Thursdays and my newsletter comes out on Thursdays, and it's really connected to the podcast, but I talk about some different things. Sometimes I promote other people's courses or events. I recently hired, you all are getting the scoop here. I recently hired a marketing strategist. Is definitely an investment. I hired her almost exclusively for Deliberate Freelancer as opposed to my Mel Edits work, because I really want the podcast to be its own brand and to grow. And I don't know what that looks like yet. That might be offering coaching, that might be courses down the road. She has recommended that I start a Facebook group, and I love Facebook groups. So I'm open to that to sort of build my community as I grow my listenership and my newsletter list. And, I'm still going to do the podcast. The podcast is out there and it's free. But I really want to grow this Deliberate Freelancer brand into maybe its own business in some ways. And so I've had my first session with her. She is absolutely amazing. I'm super excited and inspired by all of her ideas. And it was really important. This is one of these things where investing in your business, she is a marketing expert, and that is an area I am not expert in. And she has already kind of blown my mind with all of the ways she's thinking about my business and what I could do. So that's sort of the next thing, is how big and what comes from Deliberate Freelancer. And so stay tuned for that. I'll be talking about it eventually on my podcast.
How fantastic. Well, we could talk to you all day, but I think we've probably talked to you for nearly an hour. So we should probably take a hike. But tell us where, where everyone can find you, all the different channels that you're on, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So my writing and editing services are meledits.com, and you can find the podcast there too. But if you go to deliberatefreelancer.com, that's where you find all of the podcast episodes and show notes. And there's a link there for my newsletter. And when you sign up for the newsletter, you will get 2 freebies. You will get the email templates that I talked about that earned me $30,000 each that I sent out. So you can get those templates and pick and choose what parts might be helpful to you to send out to people. And I'm always on Twitter, as I say. So I'm on Twitter at Mel Edits, and you can also find me on LinkedIn under Melanie Padgett Powers.
Great.
Fantastic. I know you're big on Twitter. You love it, don't you?
I love Twitter.
Oh, that's fantastic. You've been so generous with your knowledge, and we're so glad we could get you on the podcast. Time zones and everything together. So it's great. And please, all our listeners, listen to Mel's podcast, because it really is a great one. The show notes in the iTunes podcast app at the moment, and that will have all the ways to connect with Mel, and it's actually in all the podcast apps as well, I've noticed, so that's good.
Yeah.
So we'll see you all next week.
Thanks again, Mel. See you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.